Okay, so from that 5th verse, the Lord said to Moses, "Go ahead of the people, take your hand the staff in which you struck the Nile." And then he said, strike the rock, and water will come out of it, so that the people may drink. This old story in our scripture has some interesting characters in it today. There's God, of course, who is always active in this journey with these people. There is Moses, who is leading them, the people themselves, and then we have this piece of wood, the staff that Moses uses to strike the rock. The setting is that the people are tired, they're hungry and they're thirsty, they're quarreling with each other, and they're testing the authority and the leadership of Moses. And I really want you to hear this, to hear what they are saying. They are accusing Moses of purposely leading them into the wilderness so he will kill them with thirst. They are not just merely unhappy in their situation. They are not frustrated by the long journey that they are taking. They are accusing Moses of leading them here purposely to kill them. Some strong stuff. This journey that they're on, this long journey home that's taking decades and decades, it's much more than a physical journey to get home. It is a journey of identity for them. A journey of discovery of who they are and what their relationship is to God and to other people. Along with a journey for them, it's also a journey for God. A God that has made a promise to Abraham and Sarah to bless their descendants, to lead them from freedom so that they can be a blessing to the world. Well, here are Abraham and Sarah's descendants, and God is still with them, but they're having some troubles. So this journey in the book of Exodus really is God working through all the dynamics of being in relationship with a people who are not perfect. In many ways, people like you and me. So here's God working out these dynamics of relationship with the Israelites through this person named Moses. Moses, the one who convinces Pharaoh of Egypt to let these people go when they were held in slavery, to convince Pharaoh to free them by bringing plague upon them, everything from being swarmed by locusts to overwhelming darkness to turning water into blood, by bringing on an infestation of frogs, death of livestock, and then finally the last terrible chapter of the plagues, when the firstborn Egyptian child in each household is killed. And then here's Moses, the one who freed them from the pursuing Egyptian army by parting the Red Sea to allow them to pass through, and then commanding the waters to crash back together when the Egyptian army was in their midst, killing them to stop the pursuit. Here is Moses, the one leading them through this long journey to make it back to their homeland. And so now, in the midst of this difficult day and this awful accusation that they are making to Moses, they still turn to him for help, because in their experience, Moses is the voice of God. Moses is the hand of God. Moses is the wisdom of God. And when Moses acted, he always had this staff in his hand. It was the staff that he used to show his power. The staff that he used to not only perform miraculous acts, but to bring on events that changed the course of their lives. Everything from a trick in which he turned the staff into a snake, and then when he picked up the snake, it turned back into a staff, to the tool that he used when he raised it over the waters of the Red Sea to part those waters so the people could flee to freedom. Over 20 times, this staff is referenced in this story of Exodus alone as the tool that Moses used to show God's power. The staff is actually even called the staff of God in the 4th chapter of Exodus. But in this story that we have today, it stops being a tool of force and becomes a tool that replenishes broken souls and famished spirits. In our story today, just as the people's relationship with God has changed from how to learning to live with each other to learning to trust that they would be provided for, this staff representing God goes from being a force of conquest to a creator of salvation. The rock is struck and life-giving water comes out. And because of that, the people can pull back from their accusations and their quarreling and continue on with their journey. Now, this, of course, is not the end of the struggles they will have, nor with other people as well. But today, in this story, God makes a claim. He makes a claim that he will provide no matter how awful the conditions might be or the struggles that the people might face, that he will provide, that they will not be forgotten. And the importance of this is not lost on these people. They gave the land names of struggle. Massa and Meribah mean quarrel and test. They discovered that God is still with them even when the battle is so overwhelming, even when that struggle is with them, their very own selves. Now, you and I, as we hear this story, the chances are small that we are not, you and I, that we are not going to face slavery in a foreign land. Thankfully, the chances are very small that we are not going to have to try to run from an army that is trying to kill us. However, even when we say that, we must admit that it's not so far in our distant past when this was a reality for some people, or still a present reality for people in some other places in our world. But you and I, as we sit here today, thankfully that we don't have to face that. But there's a good chance, and I'll even say a certainty, that we will face quarrels and tests and struggles in our own lives. Tests of will, tests of strength, tests of character and calling. Questions that we raise up to God, maybe in that same tone and accusation that the people raised to Moses. We'll have quarrels over belief, over social ideals, over rights and responsibilities and freedoms. And struggles over who we trust with authority in challenging times. That has been part of our story since the days of Moses to this day, and it will continue in the future. But throughout all of those struggles, the staff of God has always been there in one form or another. Now this staff, this presence of God, has taken on many different forms throughout history. Right? Whether it's the literal staff in the hand of Moses, the Ark of the Covenant, which carried the actual 10 Commandments, that led armies in victory on land and centers people's worship in those early tabernacles. Or the power of the throne of David, or the brutal honesty and the truth-telling of the prophets, the temple in Jerusalem, or even the human flesh upon Jesus. The power of the written and spoken word of Peter or Paul, or the writers of the Gospels who were so gripped by their experience of Jesus that they risked their lives to tell the story. When others found out their faith and belief, they would be killed. The presence of God has taken many different forms. In more recent history, the staff has maybe even been the actual Bible written in the language of the people. The power of a person, whether it's the Pope in Rome or the influential faith leaders of our day. And most often, the institution of the church itself. Now, every one of these representations of God on earth has had its failings. Every single one. even the human flesh of Jesus, as he died on the cross. But all of these staffs, all of these representations of the power of God have replenished us over the years. They have always given the people what we've needed. From sometimes it's just pure survival, and sometimes it's enlightenment into a new understanding of what the gospel message is in our day and in our time. And I think that today, on this day, more than ever when we hear this story from Exodus, all of us, are struggling to identify what that staff of God is in our lives, where that presence of God is centered, what it looks like in our life. But even in the midst of all our questions, know this, that God's staff is still here. It has not splintered away. It has not been destroyed. It is more than ever differentiated. It is more than ever less filtered than ever before. And I think it is more than ever struggling to find a hold in our lives that makes sense and centers us. But just as God replenished the people on this Exodus story when they were quarreling, when they were being tested, when they were struggling, as we today quarrel, struggle with our Christian identity, and search for God's presence and calling in our lives, know that in your struggle, God will replenish you. In a way that you won't expect. Because I can guarantee you that the people on that journey did not expect for living water to come out of that rock. And God will show up in your life, or is showing up, in a way that you least expect it or will not plan for. With the same surprising reaction that Zayden had when the water hit his forehead and his eyes open up, that same living water comes upon you in a way that you may not plan for or recognize, but know that in your struggle that God will replenish you, that life-giving water will come. May God's replenishment find you in whatever form you are, whatever form you need, whatever place you may be in. Thanks be to God. Amen.